I'm a big retro game fan, and I find myself playing Nintendo consoles more than any other. Growing up, I spent a lot of time playing my brother's Nintendo 64. Amongst Mario, Pokemon and Donkey Kong, there was one game I enjoyed a lot and have gained a much greater love for as an adult. That being Banjo-Kazooie, an incredible action-adventure collectathon game. Much like Super Mario 64, this one has you venture across various worlds and collect jiggies in order to progress. I think the fact it's puzzle pieces is genius and helps build the overall world. These are used in a much more practical manner to help construct the entrance to levels. This is fun and adds more character and reasoning behind the collectible itself. This isn't the only collectible you are encouraged to find during this game. Each world has honeycombs to find. With the exception of the introductory world, each location has 2 different honeycomb pieces to find, opposed to 6. This is also helpful to gameplay in a more general sense, as it gives the bear and bird more health. 6 pieces of honeycomb offers another life, and trust me, these become more and more needed as the difficulty increases. In addition, the musical theme of this incredible game is carried out via another collectible, musical notes. Each world has 100 musical notes. Often they're placed deliberately in order to create a kind of path throughout the level. But it isn't done to death. There's still lots of secrets and locations to be uncovered. They're more like an overview. A bit like jiggies, the notes are important as they open doors throughout Grunty's lair, so collecting as many as possible is beneficial. However, the original Nintendo 64 version is very unforgiving. If you die before exiting or collecting all 100 notes, then you will lose your current count. This can be annoying in some of the levels, like Clanker's Cavern or Click Clock Wood. However, if you're looking for an easier go of it, then the updated Xbox version removes this feature and automatically saves everything you collect. I personally prefer the native hardware, but I'm not going to lie. Accidentally dying 3 times in Gobi's Valley with 90 plus notes was starting to get jarring. To a lesser degree, this game also encourages the collection of Mumbo tokens. For context, Mumbo is a magical being who grants Banjo and Kazooie the ability to transform into various animals and objects. Things like a termite, which aids in climbing various terrain, a crocodile to travel through lower bits of the swamp otherwise inaccessible, or a pumpkin so, you can be flushed down a sentient toilet, otherwise known as Logo. Amongst a few others. These magical transformations include game progression too, as they are needed to gain some jiggies. Like, you have to be a walrus to race a polar bear. Or you need to be a crocodile to beat another crocodile in an eating contest. For the short bursts that they're introduced for, they work very well, as just a fun change up to the gameplay. It also makes these worlds feel more utilised and lived in via specific character interactions. Lastly, every world has 5 Jinjos scattered amongst the world. These little creatures will reward you with a jiggy upon finding all of them. They even come to Banjo and Kazooie's aid in the final showdown later on in the game. In terms of the overall story itself, it's basically a twisted fairy tale. The evil witch, Gruntilda, is annoyed that she isn't the most beautiful and fair creature in the land. Banjo's sister Tooty is. During a flat-out rage, the evil and narcissistic witch kidnaps her and attempts to steal her beauty for herself and leave Tooty as a toxic monster. Whilst the witch flies down and nabs her, she calls out for Banjo, who is asleep during the middle of the day. The first reason that Banjo is such a relatable protagonist. He and Kazooie wake up to find that she is gone, so they go on a quest to get her back. This is fine as the story. It establishes the main characters well. It applies the stakes of what will happen if they're not quick, and establishes just how horrible Grunty is as a main villain. Now, this is a family game akin to Mario and Sonic, yet Gruntilda is so much more gritty and horrendous than most villains from that genre. She has such a powerful impact, and she's always present across the game. I mean in a literal sense too, as the hub world you progress through is shaped like her big pointed head. In addition to this, she is constantly mocking you. The more you play, she pops up and reminds you that you will fail. It's good British humour and adds so much more depth to her character and the game. As far as playable characters go, Banjo and Kazooie are great. They operate as a single unit during gameplay and don't separate. They do in a future installment, but that's a discussion for a future video. At the beginning of the game in Spiral Mountain, the player is given the choice of whether they want to play the tutorial section and learn the base moves or skip it. This is an excellent feature and one I wish other games had. I mean, Bottles, who teaches you, might be annoyed about it, but hey, you've done it once before. You should be happy that you're back. Speaking of Bottles, he and his molehill appear in every world in order to teach Banjo and Kazooie new moves, and there are just so many. Some moves become much more useful than others for gameplay, like the most commonly used being the Talon Trot, which allows Kazooie to use her legs to help you move up certain terrain, and just generally it's quicker to get around. Eggs is another big one. Kazooie has the ability to shoot eggs out of her mouth or drop them from Banjo's backpack. This becomes helpful in obtaining certain jiggies down the line. One of my personal favourites, but not the most practical, is Flight Pad. This gameplay feels much more fluid than the likes of Mario's Wing Cap or Diddy Kong's Jet Barrel. Things like the Wonder Wing are fun but are totally overpowered. It grants them invincibility, but at the cost of gold feathers, which are much rarer than eggs or red feathers needed for other moves. I tend to save the Wonder Wing for when I'm really struggling with a task. The last of these sorts of moves are the Wadding Boots, and the Turbo Trainers, which give them moments of increased speeds. These can only be used in certain scenarios. This is indicated by the pairs of footwear appearing in the overworld. They are fun nonetheless, despite being more restrictive than anything else in the level. Outside of the incredible expansive hub world, in this case Grunty's Lair, this game has 9 sprawling worlds to explore. In a similar vein to other collectathons, the worlds are hidden amongst the hub, but this game takes it a step further in such a good way. If you take something like Super Mario 64, where you open a door and jump into a painting, that's that, you're in the level. Equally, with SpongeBob Battle for Bikini Bottom, the various bus stops in the hub world will take you to each level. But Banjo-Kazooie has you seek out the levels in the labyrinth, which pushes the overall idea to really hunt for things in this game. The further you get into the game, the greater distance the completed puzzle is to the entrance. The first major level of the game is fun, Mumbo's Mountain. This picturesque mountainside level is very much the introduction arena. More than anything, this level teaches the player how the core mechanics work with jiggies that are easily accessible, like traversing terrain or using eggs to take down an angry gorilla. This is objectively one of the best opening worlds to a game. Next up is Treasure Trove Cove, one of the most loved and iconic worlds from the whole game. This world beautifully encapsulates the pirate theme, utilising rocky beaches and a vast ocean and a pirate ship, all to explore. Given that this world introduces the flying mechanic, there's a perfect opportunity to really explore this world from every corner. This world has greater danger like Snacker the shark in the water, or a mini boss fight with a crab, which would be harder for new players. I think the spike in difficulty is fair between these worlds. Clanker's Cavern implements the gimmick of a giant robotic fish in the centre of some dirty water. Grunty used him as her garbage disposal, and as a result, this level is much murkier. Unlike the previous two, this level isn't obviously sprawling. Instead, I would argue it really pushes the player to explore every nook and cranny of this robot. The jiggies and notes are hidden within the various pathways of Clanker. It is arguably more difficult than the previous two. Now, I'm normally not a fan of water worlds in games, like Dire Dire Docks from Super Mario 64, is one of my least favourite levels from any popular game. But I did appreciate this level a lot more on a recent playthrough. Bubble Gloop Swamp has the player explore a thriving marsh in order to discover its secrets. I feel like this world has its key objectives be a lot more noticeable. Everything from a giant turtle to the internal maze. Whilst I don't think this level is particularly hard, I do find the crocodile jiggy difficult, especially without the trainers. With all the twists and turns and possibilities of falling into the bog, it makes finding everything feel satisfying. Freezeezy Peak is absolutely my favourite level of the game. This cold, Christmas-themed wonderland is the most warming experience of the whole game. This world has the titular bear and bird take out evil snowmen, give polar bear children their Christmas presents, and fly through a decorative star several times. This world almost feels like a relaxing chill break from the grittier edge to the rest of the game. That's not to say this world is easy, that difficulty is still there, especially the second race with Boggy the polar bear. Much like the previous, Gobi's Valley encapsulates its internal themes very well too. In this case, an ancient Egyptian world. I would argue this one has a warmer edge to it though. Well, compared to something like Angry Aztec from Donkey Kong 64. This level encourages the exploration of pyramids and sphinxes, whilst also seeking Gobi himself, the tired camel who seems to want peace in the hot sand. I would argue this level doesn't look like it offers much at first glance, but it is packed with things to do. Mad Monster Mansion is objectively the darkest and grittiest world, while still maintaining a nice cheesy edge. More so than any other level so far in this game, Mad Monster Mansion really pushes exploration of different rooms in this spooky mansion. I always find this level a fun one to revisit, more so than anything else is hopping about the world as a pumpkin. There's a large hedge maze to explore and a haunted piano for the player to tackle. Rusty Bucket Bay continues this larger theme of just explore every room you come across. I will admit, on first playthrough, some doors and windows weren't obvious to break down. Unlike other games, it really doesn't hold your hand, which is much better in my opinion. This large rusty ship is definitely the hardest level of the game and has the most notorious Jiggy. The engine room Jiggy is such a difficult one to collect, traversing the fans and cylinders is a very difficult platforming task to do, and causes a lot of speedruns to fall apart. Despite the difficulty of the world and mapping out the most coherent route, I still think this is a very fun penultimate world. The last major world of the game is Click Clock Wood. Unlike the other levels of the game, it has a very fun gimmick. This enchanted woodland area is split into 4 versions of the world, each representing a different season. You begin with spring and head all the way through into winter. The really fun thing here is that an action you did in one season will trigger a change in another one. So in a way, you're really carrying the narrative of the world all the way through. I think this kind of level is the perfect way to end the worlds off on a high. This game is loosely based on the Teddy Bear's Picnic, a British nursery rhyme. I would argue that that idea is strongest with this world and the hub world. The worlds themselves have a much stronger tether to the hub world than most, as every level has a grunty face switch to find. Pressing these buttons will trigger an event in the hub world in order to get another Jiggy. These 9 switches will bring the total jigsaw count up to 100. Once the player has taken on all the worlds and found a minimum of 810 notes and 94 Jiggies, you can head on to the next stage of the game. However, this game does reward the 100% completion route by giving the player additional health and items for the final showdown with Gruntilda. I like this, as it's a real incentive to do everything in the game, especially if the player is struggling to beat Gruntilda otherwise. Before the fight, the game throws a hilarious curveball your way in the form of a narcissistic game show, akin to the likes of a Mario Party board. The player must progress through a game created by Grunty. The real strategy here is finding the most effective route across this game board. Grunty tests the player with pointless knowledge about her. Brentilda, the fairy and Grunty's sister, will tell players facts about Grunty. More than anything, it becomes a memory game. While I don't really feel like this section is necessary, it is a lot of fun and is actually quite hilarious too. The final showdown is one of the best boss fights to come from Nintendo. It essentially tests the player on everything they have learned for the whole game. The boss is split into various subsections which each implement a different moveset to fight Grunty. Things like taking to the air and using a beak bomb, or shooting Kazooie's eggs at her. The final climax of the fight is feeding several small Jinjo statues. These are the building blocks to the larger Jinjonator. A huge Jinjo that flies through the air and knocks Grunty from the top of this building, ending the game and leaving you victorious. This is such a fun game. I come back and replay it all the time. I think the team at Rare, Nintendo and Kirkhope should be very proud. Speaking of Grant Kirkhope, he's a very well-known music coordinator who created the entire soundtrack for this game amongst others, such as Donkey Kong 64 and Yooka-Laylee. These tunes are some of the most iconic in all of gaming. Grant perfectly manages to capture the themes of each world through music alone. I mean, the hub area is a twisted riff on a Teddy Bear's Picnic, and it just works so effectively. I really hope we see more of Banjo-Kazooie in the future. While I'm a big fan of Banjo-Tooie, I feel it is deserving of being a well-acclaimed sequel. The same can't be said of Nuts and Bolts. While I don't think that game is horrible, it just didn't feel like a Banjo-Kazooie game, and that's really sad. Super Smash Bros. Ultimate proved the fanbase for this game is still very much alive. The internet more or less broke during the Banjo-Kazooie reveal. I was so happy when that Jiggy bounced across the screen. I really hope Microsoft get the old team at Rare back together for a much wanted Banjo 3E one day. Well, that's just my thoughts. I would love to hear what you all think in comments down below. If you enjoyed what you saw today, then could you please hit that like button and subscribe? It will really help my channel continue to grow. If you haven't already, then I would highly suggest finding this game and giving it a go. It's well worth a playthrough. And with that, I will see you on the next one.